Welcome back, fellow wanderers of Middle-earth, to another journey into the heart of Tolkien's greatest tale. I'm your guide through these chronicles of courage and sacrifice. And tonight we begin the third and final part of our fellowship's story. A tale that will test every bond of friendship and lead our heroes toward choices that will echo through the ages. Before we venture forth together into Elrond's council chamber, drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is there. Are you drifting off to sleep in a cozy bedroom, or perhaps listening during a quiet moment in your day? Your presence makes this journey all the more meaningful. If these tales of Middle-earth bring peace to your spirit and help carry you toward restful sleep, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our fellowship of dreamers. Ring that notification bell so you'll never miss our adventures through Tolkien's timeless world. Tonight, we gather with Frodo and his companions in Rivendell's halls, where representatives from across Middle-earth have assembled to confront truths that will reshape their understanding of the darkness threatening everything they hold dear. The comfort of Elrond's house cannot long shelter them from the choices that await. Choices that will scatter the fellowship to different fates and set in motion the final act of our tale. So settle into your most comfortable position, let your breathing slow and deepen, and join me as we witness the council that will determine the fate of the Third Age. The great hall where Elrond convenes his council carries the weight of millennia within its ancient walls. Representatives from across Middle-earth have arrived bearing news that paints an increasingly desperate picture of Sauron's growing influence. The morning light filtering through the chamber's high windows illuminates faces marked by long journeys and terrible knowledge. Gandalf's account of his imprisonment transforms everything the company believed about their enemy's capabilities. The wizard's voice carries undertones of exhaustion that speak to ordeals beyond normal endurance. His description of Saruman's betrayal reveals corruption reaching into the very heart of the White Council. The revelation that Saruman the White has allied himself with the Dark Lord sends ripples of shock through the assembled company. This master of law and wisdom, long considered their greatest defense against Mordor's influence, has become another instrument of their enemy's will. The implications stretch far beyond simple military alliance toward a fundamental corruption of wisdom itself. Gandalf's escape from Orthanc required intervention from sources that few among the company fully comprehend. The great eagles who carried him to safety represent powers that operate according to principles older than the current age. Their assistance suggests that forces beyond mortal understanding have begun taking direct action in the growing conflict. Boromir's testimony brings word of Gondor's desperate situation. Two ears that had hoped the great kingdom still stood strong against the darkness. His weathered hands and travel-stained cloak tell their own stories of the long journey from Minas Tirith. The dreams that guided him to Rivendell speak of supernatural influences directing events toward this crucial gathering. The son of Denethor's account reveals how Mordor's armies have grown beyond all previous estimates. Osgiliath has fallen to forces that seemed to emerge from the very stones of that ancient city. The outer defenses of Gondor crumble beneath assaults. They combine conventional warfare with darker arts that corrupt the very ground they touch. Boromir's growing fixation on the ring becomes apparent to those with eyes to see such things. His suggestions about using it as a weapon against Sauron carry undertones of desperation that hint at dangerous thinking. The ring's influence extends its tendrils toward anyone who remains in its presence for extended periods. Legolas brings tidings from the northern forests that complete the picture of coordinated evil spreading across all lands. His account of Gollum's escape from the woodland realm reveals how even the most secure prisons cannot hold creatures whose malice has been shaped by the ring's corrupting touch. The implications of Gollum's freedom add another layer of uncertainty to their already desperate situation. Gimli's suspicions regarding elven competence create tension that threatens to disrupt the council's proceedings. The dwarf's blunt manner masks deeper concerns about trusting crucial matters to those whose judgment has already proven fallible. His loyalty to dwarf kind colors his interpretation of events in ways that sometimes obscure rather than illuminate truth. The growing friction between Legolas and Gimli represents ancient grievances that predate the current crisis by centuries. Their people's history carries wounds that have never properly healed. The urgency of their present situation forces them to work together. Despite these inherited antagonisms, Elrond's guidance steers the discussion toward the central question that has brought them all together. The ring cannot be hidden, for its power calls to its master across any distance. It cannot be wielded, for its use would corrupt even the most noble intentions. The terrible logic of their situation points toward only one solution that offers hope for victory. The ring must be destroyed in the fires where it was made. This simple statement carries implications that stagger everyone present. Mount Doom lies in the heart of Mordor, surrounded by armies and defenses that make approach seem impossible. Yet impossibility remains their only path toward salvation. The weight of this revelation settles over the council like a shroud. Each member contemplates what such a mission would require, and what chances of survival it might offer. The silence that follows speaks louder than any words about the magnitude of the sacrifice being contemplated. In this moment of terrible clarity, the true nature of their choice becomes apparent. They must risk everything on a venture that offers little hope of success, or watch as darkness claims dominion over all the lands they love. The debate that follows Elrond's revelation splits along lines that reveal the fundamental differences in how each race approaches seemingly impossible challenges. Boromir's voice carries the weight of a warrior who has spent years watching his homeland's defenses crumble beneath relentless assault. His arguments for wielding the ring as a weapon spring from desperation rather than ambition. The Son of Gondor paints vivid pictures of what victory might look like if they could turn Sauron's own power against him. The ring could raise armies from the earth itself, could turn the tide of battles that have raged for generations without resolution. His logic follows military thinking that sees weapons as tools to be used rather than feared. But Gandalf's response cuts through these hopeful visions with the sharp edge of hard-won wisdom. The wizard's refusal to even touch the ring stems from intimate knowledge of how its corruption operates. Power offered freely always demands payment that exceeds its apparent benefits. The ring's influence grows stronger in proportion to the wielder's native strength and nobility. Those most capable of using it effectively would find themselves most completely enslaved by its will. The very qualities that might make someone worthy of such power also make them most vulnerable to its ultimate betrayal. Gandalf's account of his own temptation reveals the depths of the ring's seductive influence. Even brief contact had shown him visions of himself as a force for order and justice throughout Middle-earth. These dreams felt more real and more desirable than any earthly pleasure. Yet beneath their golden surface lay the same tyranny that Sauron himself represents. The wizard's wisdom comes from recognizing that good intentions cannot protect against corruption that operates at levels deeper than conscious thought. The ring's power transforms its wielders gradually, making each compromise seem reasonable while leading them step by step toward the same destination that Sauron reached through more direct methods. Elrond's ancient perspective adds weight to these warnings, through examples drawn from ages of experience with similar temptations. The history of Middle-earth chronicles numerous heroes who began with noble goals, only to become the very threats they originally sought to defeat. Power concentrated beyond certain limits invariably corrupts those who wield it. The Elf Lord's account of Isildur's failure provides the most relevant example of how even brief contact with the ring can override lifetimes of virtue and wisdom. The greatest king of men in his age could not resist the ring's influence when the moment of choice arrived. What hope could lesser beings have of succeeding where he failed? Yet, the alternative to wielding the ring offers no comfort to those seeking easier solutions. Hiding it has already proven impossible, as Sauron's servants grow stronger and more perceptive with each passing season. The Shire's borders cannot protect what calls across continents to its master's searching will. Destroying the ring requires a journey into the heart of enemy territory, with no hope of military support or strategic advantage. Mount Doom lies beyond the reach of any army that the Free Peoples might assemble. The mission would depend entirely on stealth and fortune, qualities that cannot be commanded or guaranteed. The mathematics of their situation admit no solution that offers reasonable hope of success. Every path leads through dangers that would challenge the greatest heroes of their age. Yet their choices must be made by whatever volunteers can be found among those present in Elrond's hall. Frodo's quiet voice cuts through the growing despair with words that surprise even himself. His offer to bear the ring forward comes not from courage, but from understanding that someone must accept the burden, and that his small size and unassuming nature might offer advantages that greater heroes would lack. The Hobbit's realization that the task has already begun to change him provides wisdom beyond his years or experience. The ring's weight grows heavier, not just physically, but spiritually, and delaying the decision will only make the eventual choice more difficult as its influence continues to strengthen. His acceptance transforms the abstract debate into concrete planning. The question shifts from whether the mission is possible to how it might be accomplished. Hope emerges not from confidence in success, but from recognition that action offers the only alternative to certain defeat. The Council's focus narrows toward practical considerations of route, timing, and companionship. The impossible has become merely extremely difficult, a transformation that allows planning to begin despite the overwhelming odds they face. The transformation from desperate debate to concrete action begins with Elrond's recognition that Frodo cannot bear this burden alone. The Elf Lord's wisdom shapes itself around the symbolic power of numbers, the ancient significance of 9 companions chosen to stand against the 9 riders who serve the Dark Lord. Aragorn's acceptance of the quest comes with the weight of destiny finally acknowledged. The ranger has spent decades avoiding the throne that bloodline grants him, preferring the freedom of the wild roads to the responsibilities of kingship. But Isildur's failure with the ring creates obligations that stretch across generations to touch his distant heir. The son of Arathorn's commitment carries implications that extend far beyond personal sacrifice. His presence in the Fellowship announces his intention to reclaim the throne of Gondor, should they survive the mission ahead. The ranger's transformation into a king begins with this first step toward accepting the legacy he has long avoided. Boromir's decision to join reflects the desperate straits of his homeland, rather than confidence in their mission's success. Gondor's need for any hope, however slim, overrides his military training's emphasis on achievable objectives. The steward's son chooses loyalty to the ring-bearer over the strategic wisdom that counsels retreat and defense. His motivations blend nobility with practicality in ways that reveal the complexity of his character. Protecting Frodo serves Gondor's interests, while also offering the slim possibility that proximity to the ring might create opportunities for his kingdom's salvation. The contradiction between these goals will prove significant in the trials ahead. Legolas volunteers with the fluid grace that characterizes all elven decisions, his commitment emerging from principles that operate on timescales longer than mortal concerns. The Woodland Prince brings skills honed over centuries of protecting ancient forests, from the darkness that has begun stirring in every corner of Middle-earth. His archery represents more than mere technical proficiency. Each arrow carries the accumulated wisdom of his people, their understanding of how to strike precisely at the heart of corruption without becoming corrupted in return. The elf's presence offers hope that some among the Fellowship might survive what lies ahead. Gimli's participation springs from dwarf clan honor and the need to balance Legolas's presence with representation from his own people. But beneath these surface motivations lies genuine friendship for the hobbits, and recognition that Sauron's victory would mean extinction for dwarf holds throughout Middle-earth. The son of Gloin brings more than his axe to their company. His knowledge of underground passages and mountain paths may prove crucial when conventional routes become impassable. The dwarf's practical skills complement the more ethereal abilities of his companions. Sam's inclusion requires no formal decision, his loyalty to Frodo eliminating any possibility of separation. The gardener's determination transcends the council's deliberations entirely. His presence represents the unshakable foundation upon which the entire mission will ultimately rest. Merry and Pippin's arguments for inclusion meet initial resistance from those who see them as too young and inexperienced for such dangers. But their performance during the journey from the Shire demonstrates courage that age alone cannot measure. Their kinship with Frodo creates bonds stronger than military discipline. The younger hobbits bring perspectives that older, wiser companions might lack. Their innocence offers protection against certain forms of corruption, while their natural hobbit, Ensa, provides grounding when the quest's supernatural elements threaten to overwhelm practical considerations. Gandalf's participation completes the Fellowship with the one member, whose wisdom spans ages and whose power might match the supernatural forces they will certainly encounter. The wizard's presence transforms a desperate gamble into a mission with genuine possibility of success. The oath they swear creates bonds that transcend individual survival or personal glory. Each member pledges to protect the ring bearer above all other considerations, understanding that Frodo's success represents their only hope for preserving everything they value in Middle-earth. This commitment requires sacrificing normal human desires for safety, comfort, and the simple pleasure of remaining alive. The Fellowship's formation marks the end of their individual lives as previously understood, transforming them into instruments serving purposes larger than personal happiness. The practical preparations for departure fill the remaining days in Rivendell with activity that masks the deeper emotional preparations required for such a journey. Weapons receive careful attention. Supplies are selected for durability rather than comfort, and routes are studied with the understanding that maps may prove worthless once they enter truly hostile territory. Elrond's final counsels emphasize the mission's essential nature, while acknowledging the probability that some or all of the Fellowship may not survive to see its completion. The Elf Lord's blessings carry the accumulated wisdom of ages, yet cannot alter the fundamental mathematics of their undertaking. The morning of departure arrives with unseasonable warmth that feels like a final gift from the powers that favor their cause. The Fellowship gathers in Rivendell's courtyard with equipment that speaks of long journeys through dangerous lands, and the possibility that they may never again know such comfort and safety. Their first steps beyond Rivendell's protected borders mark the true beginning of the quest that will test every bond between them. The Fellowship moves forward, united in purpose, but not yet unified in spirit, a transformation that only shared danger and hardship can accomplish. The weight of Middle-earth's fate rests on 9 pairs of shoulders as they take the hidden paths that lead toward the misty mountains and the uncertain road beyond. The path that leads away from Rivendell's sheltered valley climbs steadily through foothills that grow increasingly barren, as the Fellowship moves toward the great mountain wall blocking their southern route. The gentle streams and flowering meadows of Elrond's domain give way to rocky slopes, where only the hardiest plants manage to find purchase in the thin soil. Winter's grip tightens with each mile of elevation gained. The comfortable traveling weather that blessed their departure becomes a memory as cold winds sweep down from the peaks ahead. Snow begins falling in intermittent flurries that hint at the storms gathering in the higher altitudes. Gandalf's choice of the Redhorn Pass reflects careful calculation of their limited options. The alternative routes through the mountains would add weeks to their journey while offering no guarantee of easier passage. The direct path over Caradhras represents their best hope for crossing the mountain barrier, before winter's full fury makes travel impossible. The wizard's knowledge of the pass comes from previous crossings in more favorable seasons. His warnings about the mountain's temperament prepare the Fellowship for challenges that go beyond simple weather and difficult terrain. Caradhras has earned its reputation through behavior that suggests conscious malevolence rather than mere geographical hostility. The final village before the high passes offers their last opportunity to purchase additional cold weather gear and gather intelligence about current conditions on the mountain. The local inhabitants speak of Caradhras with the careful respect reserved for dangerous neighbors whose moods cannot be predicted or appeased. Their accounts of recent storms carry undertones that suggest supernatural intervention in natural weather patterns. Snow has fallen at elevations and seasons where it never appears under normal circumstances. The mountain seems to be actively defending itself against travelers seeking passage through its domain. The Fellowship's ascent begins in conditions that remain merely uncomfortable rather than dangerous. The established trail shows signs of regular maintenance by those who make their living guiding travelers through the pass. Cairns mark the safest route, while warning of areas where avalanches or rock slides pose particular threats. But as they climb higher, these human modifications to the landscape begin disappearing beneath accumulating snow. The trail becomes increasingly difficult to follow as storm clouds gather around the peaks ahead. The temperature drops with alarming speed as afternoon shadows lengthen across the mountainside. Caradhras reveals its true nature as night approaches, and the Fellowship seeks shelter among a cluster of standing stones that offers minimal protection from the growing wind. The storm that descends upon them carries malice that goes beyond natural fury. Snow falls with deliberate precision, seeking out every gap in their defenses. The mountain's assault operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical challenges multiply as snowdrifts form barriers across the path, while wind threatens to sweep unwary travelers from narrow ledges. But beneath these obvious dangers lies a spiritual oppression that saps strength and determination with supernatural efficiency. Boromir's attempts to break through the deepening snow require heroic effort that exhausts him within minutes. The drifts reform faster than they can be cleared, as if the mountain actively repairs the damage to its defenses. Each step forward costs more energy than the last, while progress becomes increasingly difficult to measure. Legolas demonstrates his elven nature by walking on top of snow that supports his weight, while swallowing his companions to the waist. His ability to scout ahead provides crucial intelligence about the path's condition, but also highlights how differently the mountain treats various members of their company. Gimli's dwarf constitution proves invaluable against the cold. His people's mountain heritage, allowing him to function effectively in conditions that leave others struggling. But even his hardy nature begins showing strain, as the supernatural elements of the storm intensify beyond what mere physical toughness can overcome. The hobbits suffer most severely from the combination of cold, altitude, and the mountain's malevolent attention. Their smaller bodies lose heat rapidly, while their lack of mountain experience makes every step a potential disaster. Sam's determination keeps him moving when others might surrender to despair. Gandalf's efforts to counter Caradhras directly reveal the extent of the mountain's power, and the futility of direct confrontation with such forces. His attempts to clear the path through magical intervention meet resistance. That suggests the mountain draws strength from sources deeper than mere stone and snow. The wizard's fire spells produce temporary relief, but cannot overcome the fundamental hostility that drives the storm. Each victory proves temporary as the mountain marshals new attacks that seem specifically designed to counter whatever defense the Fellowship manages to establish. The decision to retreat comes when continued advance becomes literally impossible rather than merely dangerous. The snow reaches depths that would bury even the tallest members of their company, while the wind achieves velocities that make standing upright a constant struggle. Their withdrawal down the mountainside requires as much courage as the original ascent. The storm continues its assault even as they descend, suggesting that Caradhras takes personal offense at their attempted passage. The mountain seems determined to destroy them, regardless of whether they persist in their crossing attempt. The Fellowship reaches the lower slopes in a state of exhaustion that goes beyond simple physical fatigue. The mountain's supernatural malice has drained their spirits as thoroughly as the cold and exertion depleted their bodies. The defeat feels personal in ways that mere geographical obstacles never achieve. Their return to the sheltered valley below Caradhras marks the first major setback in their quest. The direct route to Mordor has been denied by forces that operate according to principles older and more powerful than their mission's urgency. Gandalf's grim assessment of their remaining options leads inevitably toward a choice that all of them hoped to avoid. The path over the mountains having failed, only one route remains that might allow them to continue their journey southward. The entrance to the mines of Moria looms in their future, like a doorway into darkness that may prove far more dangerous than anything Caradhras could devise. Gandalf's announcement that they must seek passage through the ancient dwarf realm carries implications that cast shadows over the entire Fellowship. The wizard's reluctance speaks to dangers that may surpass even the supernatural malice they encountered on Caradhras. His knowledge of what lies beneath the mountains comes from sources that few among the living can claim to understand. The path to Moria's western entrance leads through desolate country where no birds sing and no streams flow clear. The very landscape around the doors of Durin reflects the darkness that has claimed the once great kingdom. Trees stand bare and twisted despite the season, their branches reaching toward sky like skeletal fingers frozen in supplication. Gimli's excitement provides the only note of hope in their grim procession toward the mountain's heart. His tales of Khazad-dûm's former glory paint pictures of halls vast enough to house entire cities. Workshops where the finest craftsmanship in Middle-earth once flourished under the skilled hands of his people. The dwarf's anticipation of reunion with his cousin Balin adds personal dimension to what might otherwise remain merely a passage through dangerous territory. His last news from the expedition that sought to reclaim Moria spoke of early successes and growing confidence that the ancient realm might be restored to its former splendor. But Gandalf's silence regarding Balin's colony grows more ominous as they approach the sealed entrance. The wizard's reluctance to share whatever knowledge he possesses suggests information too terrible for casual revelation. His eyes carry shadows that speak of understanding purchased at prices too high for comfort. The doors of Durin stand closed against the dying light of afternoon, their mithril inlays barely visible beneath centuries of weathering and neglect. The entrance but once welcomed traders and ambassadors from across Middle-earth now presents a barrier that seems designed to keep the world out rather than invite visitors into the mountain's halls. The riddle inscribed in flowing elvish script above the doorway speaks to the friendship that once existed between the dwarf lords and the elven smiths of Eritgin. These doors were crafted in times when cooperation between the free peoples achieved wonders that neither race could accomplish alone. Gandalf's struggle to recall the password reveals how much knowledge has been lost in the dark years since Moria's fall. The wizard's vast learning encounters gaps that reflect the systematic destruction of records and traditions that accompanied Sauron's earlier campaigns against the kingdoms of Middle-earth. The word friend spoken in the elven tongue finally opens doors that have remained sealed for generations. The simplicity of the solution provides bitter commentary. on how complexity often obscures truths that require only basic understanding to unlock. Friendship remains the key that opens hearts as well as doors. The pool that spreads before Moria's entrance carries an unnatural stillness that suggests depths far greater than its surface appearance might indicate. The water's dark mirror reflects no light from the stars above, as if the liquid itself has been touched by the same corruption that claimed the realm beyond the doors. Bill the pony's terrified refusal to enter the mountain demonstrates the instinctive wisdom that animals possess regarding supernatural dangers. Sam's heartbreak at releasing his faithful companion into the wilderness adds personal cost to their necessary choices. The pony's departure removes their last connection to the innocent world they have left behind. The Fellowship's passage through the opened doors marks a transition from the natural world into realms where different laws govern reality itself. The darkness that greets them carries weight that presses against consciousness like a living thing. Their torches seem to burn less brightly once they cross the threshold. The silence within Moria surpasses mere absence of sound to become a presence in its own right. The halls that once rang with the music of hammers on anvils, and the songs of craftsmen at their work now hold only echoes that seem to whisper warnings about the fate that befell the mountain's former inhabitants. Gimli's voice grows quieter as they penetrate deeper into the realm his people once called home. His descriptions of the halls they pass carry undertones of confusion as reality fails to match his expectations. The Dwarf Lord's growing unease reflects recognition that something fundamental has changed in Khazad-dûm's character. The first bones they encounter speak to violence that swept through these corridors like a tide of destruction. The scattered remains show signs of weapons that no civilized army would employ. Claw marks on stone surfaces suggest enemies that fought with natural weapons as terrible as any forged blade. Gandalf's torch reveals wall carvings that chronicle Moria's glory days, when dwarfcraft reached heights that subsequent ages have never equaled. But many of these artistic treasures bear damage that speaks to deliberate defacement rather than simple neglect. Someone or something has worked systematically to erase the evidence of dwarf achievement. The growing sense of wrongness that pervades their passage through the outer halls suggests that Moria's current inhabitants have transformed the mountain into something antithetical to its original purpose. Where dwarves once created beauty and utility in equal measure, their successors have brought only destruction and decay. The deeper tunnels beckon ahead with promise of passage toward their ultimate destination. But the path forward leads through darkness that seems to actively resist their torchlight. Every step takes them further from the world of growing things and closer to whatever force has made Khazad-dûm its domain. The Fellowship moves forward into uncertainty, with only Gandalf's knowledge to guide them through passages that may no longer lead where ancient maps suggest they should. The mountain's heart awaits their coming, with whatever reception the new masters of Moria have prepared for unwelcome visitors. The chamber they discover beyond a corridor marked with dwarf runes tells the final chapter of Balin's expedition with terrible clarity. Shafts of pale light filter down from openings high above, illuminating a scene that transforms Gimli's hopes into the darkest grief. The tomb that dominates the room's center bears inscriptions that need no translation for those who understand the language of loss. Balin, son of Fundin, lies beneath the marble slab that proclaims his achievement and his doom in equal measure. The inscription identifies him as Lord of Moria, a title earned through courage but held for far too brief a time. The dwarf, who had been Gimli's kinsman and the companion of Thorin Oakenshield, now rests in the very halls he died trying to reclaim. Gimli's reaction transcends simple mourning to become something approaching spiritual devastation. His hands trace the carved letters of his cousin's name with reverence that speaks to bonds forged in the deep places of the earth, where dwarf loyalty runs stronger than mountain stone. The tears that fall speak to the death of more than one dwarf. The scattered weapons and armor surrounding the tomb reveal the desperate nature of Balin's final stand. The positioning of bones and broken shields tells the story of warriors who fought back to back against overwhelming odds, selling their lives dearly but ultimately falling to enemies that gave no quarter to the defenders of their ancestral home. Gandalf's examination of the scene reveals details. That military experience teaches him to read like text written in blood and steel. The angles of fallen weapons, the distribution of enemy remains. The strategic positioning of barricades all combined to paint pictures of a siege that lasted days rather than hours. The Book of Records that Ori kept until the very end provides the written chronicle of how hope gradually transformed into desperation and finally into resignation. The scribe's careful hand recorded each small victory and each mounting loss with the methodical precision that characterizes dwarf record-keeping even in the face of certain doom. Gandalf's voice carries the weight of inevitability as he reads aloud from pages stained with blood and shadow. The early entries speak of successful reclamation efforts, of chambers cleared and forges relit, of the growing confidence that Moria might indeed be restored to its former glory through determination and dwarf craft. But the tone changes as weeks pass into months, and the true nature of their enemies becomes apparent. The references to drums in the deepened shadows that move without light reveal supernatural opposition that conventional warfare cannot overcome. The dwarves found themselves fighting not just orcs and goblins, but darker things that should have remained buried. The final entries chronicle the systematic isolation of Balin's company, as their enemies cut off escape routes and sealed chambers one by one. The book records the deaths of named companions, each loss diminishing their chances, while increasing the desperation of those who remained to carry on the hopeless fight. Ori's last words speak to courage that transcends hope of survival. The scribe continued recording events even as the final assault began, his dedication to preserving the truth stronger than his fear of what approached through the darkness. His pen fell silent only when the chamber's defenses finally collapsed. The drumming that begins in the depths below announces that Moria's current inhabitants have detected their presence. The rhythmic pounding carries messages in a language that predates speech, communications between creatures whose alliance stems from shared hatred of all things that live and grow in the light above. The sound grows closer with each passing moment, accompanied by the scraping of countless claws against stone and the harsh voices of orcs organizing for battle. The enemy moves with purpose, born of long familiarity with these tunnels, while the Fellowship faces combat in territory that offers no advantages to defenders. Gandalf's swift preparations for battle revealed the wizard's understanding that retreat has become impossible. The chamber's entrances funnel approaching enemies into kill zones, where superior numbers cannot be brought to bear simultaneously. The tomb that houses Bolin's remains becomes the anchor point for their defensive line. The hobbits draw swords that seem almost comically small compared to the weapons wielded by their larger companions, but their determination burns as brightly as any warrior's courage. Sam's protective stance near Frodo speaks to loyalty that will not waver regardless of the odds they face. Legolas positions himself where his bow can command the longest approaches, his elven sight capable of picking targets from the darkness before enemies emerge into torchlight. His arrows wait like patient death for whatever creatures dare to enter his range of vision. Boromir and Aragorn take positions that will bear the heaviest fighting when the assault finally comes. Their swords reflect the chamber's pale light, like promises of vengeance for the dwarves who died defending this same ground. The rangers' faces show grim satisfaction at the prospect of meeting their enemies face to face. Gimli stands before his kinsman's tomb with axe ready, his grief transforming into the cold fury that makes dwarf warriors legendary throughout Middle-earth. His presence sanctifies their defense, while promising that Bolin's death will not go unavenged, while any of his people still draw breath. The drumming reaches crescendo as footsteps echo through the tunnels beyond. The battle for the Chamber of Muzabal begins with war cries that wake echoes in halls that have known only silence since the last dwarf fell defending his homeland. The assault begins with arrows whistling out of darkness beyond the range of torchlight. The creatures attacking them possess knowledge of every passage and alcove that might provide cover, using the mountain's architecture against defenders who must rely on unfamiliar ground for protection. Legolas responds with precision that transforms each shot into a small masterpiece of warfare. His bow sings repeatedly as arrows find targets that mortal eyes cannot distinguish from the surrounding shadows. The elf's supernatural sight allows him to pick off enemies before they can close to melee range. But the sheer numbers emerging from Moria's depths make sustained defense impossible. Orcs pour through openings that seem to multiply with each passing moment, their ranks replenished faster than even elven archery can thin them. The cramped chamber offers little room for maneuver as enemies press closer. Aragorn's swordwork speaks to years of experience fighting in confined spaces, where footwork matters more than strength. The ranger's blade finds gaps in crude armor, while his movements stay economical enough to conserve energy for the prolonged battle ahead. His positioning protects the hobbits, while maintaining support for his more aggressive companions. Boromir fights with the controlled fury of a man defending his homeland's last hopes. His sword cleaves through Orcish shields like an instrument of divine wrath, each stroke calculated to inflict maximum damage while maintaining the defensive line. The Gondorians' presence anchors their formation against the enemy's relentless pressure. Gimli's axe speaks in the ancient language of dwarf vengeance, each blow carrying the accumulated grief of his people's losses. The weapon moves in patterns taught by generations of warriors who learned their craft in these very halls. His fury burns cold and precise, making every stroke count toward the tally of lives owed for Bolin's death. The hobbits contribute what they can to the desperate defense, their smaller weapons finding vulnerable spots that larger blades might miss. Frodo's sting glows with blue light that warns of approaching enemies. while Sam's gardening tools prove surprisingly effective against creatures that never expected to face such unconventional weapons. Gandalf's staff blazes with light that drives back the worst of their enemies, while his sword adds deadly precision to their defensive efforts. But the wizard's attention divides between immediate combat and the growing awareness that something far worse than orcs stirs in Moria's deepest chambers. The moment comes when continued defense becomes suicide rather than strategy. The chamber's exits fill with enemies, while reinforcements continue arriving through passages that seem to honeycomb the mountain's interior. Gandalf's sharp command to retreat cuts through the battle's chaos like a blade through silk. Their fighting withdrawal begins with careful coordination that speaks to battlefield experience shared among the Fellowship's warriors. Legolas provides covering fire while the others gather supplies and wounded, each movement calculated to maintain their defensive capability while preparing for rapid movement. The tunnels beyond the chamber stretch ahead like arteries through the mountain's stone heart. The Fellowship moves in formation that protects their most vulnerable members, while maintaining readiness for combat that might erupt from any shadow. Their torches create moving pools of light in the endless darkness. The pursuit begins immediately as orcish voices echo through passages behind them. The enemy's familiarity with these tunnels gives them advantages that offset the Fellowship's fighting skills. Every intersection offers opportunities for ambush, while wrong turns could trap them in dead ends. Gandalf's knowledge of Moria's layout becomes their salvation, as the wizard leads them through passages that avoid the most obvious routes toward daylight. His choices balance speed against stealth, seeking paths that minimize contact with the mountain's hostile inhabitants, while maintaining progress toward their distant goal. The running battle develops its own rhythm as small groups of orcs attempt to block their advance. These skirmishes require swift resolution before larger forces can arrive to tip the balance against them. Each encounter tests their coordination, while depleting strength they cannot afford to lose. Aragorn and Boromir take turns leading their advance guard, one clearing obstacles while the other protects their rear against pursuit that never falls far behind. Their swords work in harmony despite their different fighting styles, creating zones of safety that allow the Fellowship to maintain forward momentum. Aragorn and Boromir take turns leading their advance guard, one clearing obstacles while the other protects their rear against pursuit that never falls far behind. Their swords work in harmony despite their different fighting styles, creating zones of safety that allow the Fellowship to maintain forward momentum. The mountain's interior reveals its vast scale, as they traverse halls large enough to house armies, and bridges spanning chasms that disappear into absolute darkness. The architecture speaks to dwarf engineering that defies easy comprehension. Spaces carved from living rock with precision that few surface builders could match. But signs of corruption appear everywhere in the form of crude modifications that serve orcish purposes rather than dwarfcraft. Beautiful carved pillars bear claw marks and deliberate defacement, while elegant archways support barriers designed to channel traffic for ambush rather than celebration. The drumming that follows them grows more complex, as different groups coordinate their pursuit through signals that carry across vast distances. The Fellowship finds themselves racing not just individual hunting parties, but an entire network of enemies that communicate faster than running feet can outpace organized malice. Legolas reports increasing activity ahead as well as behind, suggesting that their enemies seek to drive them toward prepared killing grounds, rather than simply overwhelming them through direct assault. The elf's warnings force constant changes in direction that slow their progress while increasing their desperation. The distant promise of daylight becomes visible as a faint glow far ahead, filtering down through shafts and openings that speak to approaching freedom. But the path toward that salvation leads through territory where their enemies have had centuries to prepare whatever reception awaits unwelcome visitors to their domain. The Fellowship presses forward with determination born of necessity, knowing that the alternative to reaching daylight involves becoming permanent residents of halls that have already claimed to many of their friends. The great hall they enter stretches beyond the reach of torchlight in all directions, its ceiling lost in shadows that seem to absorb rather than reflect the flames they carry. Massive pillars, carved from single pieces of stone, support architecture that speaks to the height of dwarf craftsmanship, when Khazad-dûm stood as the greatest of all the mountain kingdoms. The bridge spanning the vast chasm ahead represents their final obstacle before reaching the halls that lead to daylight and freedom. The narrow span arches across darkness so complete that drop stones vanish without sound, suggesting depths that may reach the very roots of the mountain itself. Gandalf pauses at the bridge's approach, with evident reluctance that goes beyond simple caution about the crossing ahead. The wizard's face carries shadows of knowledge that he has hoped never to use, understanding purchased through study of lore that most consider too dangerous for mortal minds to contemplate. The pursuit behind them grows closer as Orshish voices echo through the halls they have just traversed. But something in the quality of those sounds has changed, becoming less organized and more desperate. The creatures that have followed them this far seem to be fleeing rather than hunting. The temperature in the great hall begins rising, despite the cold stone that surrounds them on all sides. The change comes gradually at first, then with increasing intensity. That suggests some massive source of heat approaching from the depths below. The air itself seems to thicken with each passing moment. A sound emerges from the chasm that defies easy description, combining the roar of furnaces with voices that speak in languages older than civilization. The noise builds in volume and complexity until it drowns out even the echoes of their own footsteps on the ancient stone. The thing that emerges from the depths moves with deliberate grace that speaks to intelligence rather than mere bestial fury. Its form seems to shift between shadow and flame, never quite settling into shapes that mortal eyes can properly comprehend. The creature's presence fills the great hall with malevolence that presses against consciousness like a physical weight. Gandalf's recognition of what faces them transforms the wizard's demeanor from urgency to grim resignation. His voice carries the weight of ultimate authority as he commands the Fellowship to flee, while he remains to face what no other among them possesses the power to confront. The Balrog's advance across the hall demonstrates power that renders conventional weapons meaningless. Its whip of flame leaves glowing trails in the air, while its sword burns with heat that would melt ordinary steel. This creature of shadow and fire represents forces that predate the current age of the world. The Fellowship's retreat toward the bridge becomes a desperate scramble, as the ancient evil closes the distance between them with strides that cover ground faster than running feet can match. Only Gandalf's presence between them and the creature prevents immediate annihilation. The wizard's staff blazes with white light, that meets the Balrog's darkness in confrontation that speaks to conflicts older than recorded history. The two powers circle each other with the careful respect that equals show, when neither can claim certain victory through direct assault. Gandalf's voice rings through the great hall with words of power that seem to shake the very foundations of the mountain itself. His declaration that the creature cannot pass carries authority that goes beyond mortal command to touch the fundamental laws that govern the relationship between light and darkness. The bridge becomes the focal point of their confrontation. As Gandalf takes his stand on the narrow span with his staff planted firmly across the path, the wizard's small figure seems dwarfed by the approaching darkness, yet his presence fills the space with determination that refuses to yield despite overwhelming odds. The Balrog's attempt to cross meets resistance that transforms the ancient bridge into a battlefield where the fate of Middle-earth hangs in the balance. The creature's weight and fury press against barriers that draw their strength from sources deeper than stone and steel. Gandalf's final gambit draws upon power that he has held in reserve throughout their journey, forces that exact terrible prices from those who dare to wield them. The wizard's staff strikes the bridge with impact that sends cracks racing through stone that has stood for millennia without showing signs of weakness. The span's collapse takes the Balrog by surprise, sending the creature plummeting into depths that have waited since the world's making to receive such prisoners. But even in falling, the monster's whip lashes out with spite that seeks to deny the wizard his victory through mutual destruction. Gandalf's fall follows the creature into darkness that swallows both light and shadow with equal hunger. The wizard's last words carry across the chasm, like benedictions that offer what comfort they can to hearts breaking with loss and grief. The fellowship's escape from the great hall proceeds in stunned silence as the magnitude of their loss penetrates shock that initially protected them from understanding what they have witnessed. Their feet carry them toward daylight that will illuminate a world fundamentally changed by what has occurred in Moria's depths. The mountain's malevolence seems to withdraw, as if satisfied by the price extracted from those who dared to traverse its domain. The passages ahead offer no further resistance to travelers who have already paid more than any quest should require. Sunlight beckons ahead through openings that promise freedom from the darkness that has claimed their guide and protector. But the light that awaits cannot illuminate the shadows that Gandalf's sacrifice has cast across their remaining path toward Mount Doom. The Fellowship emerges from Moria diminished in number, but bound together by shared loss that will either strengthen or destroy them in the trials ahead. The daylight that greets their emergence from Moria's eastern gates falls upon faces that bear the marks of experiences no amount of preparation could have anticipated. The Fellowship stands blinking in sunshine that feels alien after the mountain's oppressive darkness, their eyes struggling to adjust to illumination that reveals the full extent of what they have lost. Sam collapses beside a stream that runs clear and cold from mountain springs untouched by the corruption festering in the halls below. His shoulders shake with sobs that speak to grief beyond his ability to articulate. The gardener's simple heart overwhelmed by the magnitude of their tragedy. The hobbits huddle together, seeking comfort that none among them can provide. Merry and Pippin's youth offers no protection against understanding that penetrates through shock to touch the raw wound of loss. Their tears flow freely while their minds struggle to accept a world that no longer contains Gandalf's reassuring presence. Legolas stands apart from the others with elven composure that masks devastation running deeper than mortal grief. His people's long perspective on life and death provides context that makes the wizard's sacrifice no less painful. The elf's silence speaks to sorrow that will endure for centuries beyond any hope of healing. Gimli's reaction combines personal loss with the broader tragedy of his people's fate. The dwarf's discovery of Balin's tomb, followed immediately by Gandalf's fall, creates layers of grief that threaten to overwhelm even his hardy constitution. His axe lies forgotten beside him, as tears carve channels through the dust of Moria that still clings to his face. Boromir attempts to maintain the stoic bearing expected of Gondor's nobility, but his efforts cannot entirely conceal the shock that leaves him staring at the mountain's bulk as if expecting the wizard to emerge from shadows that have already claimed their guide forever. Frodo bears the additional weight of understanding that Gandalf's sacrifice was made specifically to ensure the ring's continued progress toward its destination. The hobbit's burden grows heavier with the knowledge that others die so that he might have the opportunity to complete what may prove an impossible mission. Aragorn stands like a man watching his childhood end in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The ranger's relationship with Gandalf stretches back through decades of shared adventures and quiet counsel that shaped him into the leader he must now become without guidance. The weight of command settles on Aragorn's shoulders as he realizes that 8 pairs of eyes now look to him for direction that he feels unprepared to provide. Leadership in times of grief requires wisdom that cannot be taught through experience or study, only discovered through necessity. His first decisions, as the Fellowship's guide, focus on immediate survival rather than grand strategy. The company needs time to process their loss before attempting to resume a journey that has already cost them more than they imagined possible. The shelter of trees and running water offers respite that their souls require. The afternoon passes in a kind of waking dream, where normal activities like eating and tending wounds proceed automatically, while minds grapple with realities too large for easy acceptance. Conversation remains minimal, as each member works through grief in solitude despite their physical proximity. Evening approaches with the promise of darkness that none among them welcome after their recent experiences in realms where light cannot penetrate. But the natural darkness of nightfall differs fundamentally from the supernatural shadow they have escaped, carrying comfort rather than menace. Aragorn's decision to seek sanctuary in Lothlorien reflects understanding that the Fellowship cannot continue their journey in their current emotional state. The Golden Wood offers the only safe haven within reach, where they might hope to find healing for wounds that go deeper than physical injury. The path toward Galadriel's realm leads through country that grows increasingly beautiful as they distance themselves from Moria's influence. Trees stand taller and straighter while streams run clearer, as if the very landscape responds to proximity to the elven sanctuary ahead. But the Fellowship's appreciation for natural beauty remains dulled by loss that colors every perception. The most glorious sunset cannot penetrate grief that wraps around their hearts like physical armor against further pain. Their steps carry them forward through landscapes that might as well be painted on canvas for all the emotional response they generate. The first Galadrim guards appear without warning, as shadows that materialize from tree trunks with bows already drawn. Their stern faces reflect suspicion that softens only slightly when Legolas steps forward to speak in the flowing syllables of his kindred. The exchange between the woodland elf and Lothlorien's guardians reveals tensions that go beyond simple border security. References to the mountain's awakening and the shadow that has begun stirring suggest that Gandalf's battle with the Balrog carries implications extending far beyond the Fellowship's immediate concerns. Permission to enter the Golden Wood comes with escorts, whose vigilance speaks to dangers that even elven realms cannot ignore. The guards' weapons remain visible as reminders that sanctuary comes with conditions that must be observed by all who seek shelter beneath the Malin trees. The Fellowship follows their guides deeper into territory, where time moves according to different principles than those governing the outside world. Each step takes them further from the harsh realities of their quest, toward respite that their wounded spirits desperately need. The path ahead leads toward encounters that will test their unity in ways that physical danger never could. Revelations that may either heal or shatter what remains of their original purpose. The summons comes during their second night in Caras Galadon, delivered by an elf maiden whose silent approach through the Malarn groves speaks to skills that render normal concepts of stealth meaningless. Her message requests Frodo's presence for an audience that excludes his companions, though Sam receives permission to accompany his master at the lady's express invitation. Galadriel awaits them in a garden where starlight seems to gather with unusual intensity, as if the very air concentrates illumination for purposes that go beyond simple visibility. The Lady of the Golden Wood stands beside a basin carved from silver stone, her presence commanding attention without effort or artifice. Her beauty transcends mortal understanding, while remaining somehow approachable rather than overwhelming. The light that seems to emanate from her person speaks to powers that operate on frequencies beyond normal perception. Yet her manner suggests warmth rather than the terrible majesty that legends might lead visitors to expect. The silver basin holds water so still it might be polished metal rather than liquid, its surface reflecting starlight with clarity that transforms simple illumination into something approaching revelation. The mirror of Galadriel offers glimpses of truth that few among the living have been privileged to witness. Her explanation of the mirror's nature carries warnings about the dangers inherent in seeking knowledge of futures that remain uncertain. The visions it reveals might show what will come to pass, or merely what might occur if current paths continue unchanged. The difference between certainty and possibility becomes crucial when making decisions based on what the water reveals. Frodo's reluctance to look into depths that might show him truths too terrible for bearing reflects wisdom that goes beyond his years. The ring-bearer understands intuitively that knowledge carries its own burdens, that seeing potential futures might paralyze rather than inform the choices that lie ahead. But Sam's curiosity overcomes his natural caution. The gardener's love for the Shire, driving him to seek reassurance about the land he has left behind. His simple desire to know that home remains safe transforms into desperate need. When the water's surface begins revealing images that shatter his peaceful assumptions, the visions that emerge show the Shire transformed into something unrecognizable. Its green fields replaced by industrial wasteland where great wheels turn. and smoke rises from chimneys that defile the clean air hobbits have breathed for generations. The Brandywine runs dark with pollution while the party tree lies fallen and forgotten. Sam's anguish at these revelations speaks to love that connects him to every flower and growing thing within the Shire's borders. The images strike him with force that goes beyond simple visual impact to wound his very soul. His gardener's heart breaks at the sight of beauty destroyed and innocence lost. Galadriel's gentle counsel reminds him that the mirror shows only possibilities rather than certainties, that the future remains unwritten and subject to change through actions taken by those with courage to stand against darkness. The visions serve as warnings rather than prophecies, motivating rather than condemning those who witness them. Frodo's turn at the mirror brings revelations of a different character, images that speak to events occurring far from their current location. He sees Gandalf alive but changed, the wizard's grey robes replaced by white that speaks to transformation, and renewal that defies their understanding of death's finality. The sight of their lost companion fills Frodo with joy, tempered by confusion about what such visions might mean. The ring-bearer's logical mind struggles to reconcile what the mirror shows, with the certainty of Gandalf's fall into darkness that they all witnessed. Hope and doubt war within his heart as understanding remains just beyond reach. Additional visions reveal Bilbo aging rapidly in Rivendell's halls, the years that the ring had held in check now claiming their due with interest. The sight of his beloved cousin growing frail and elderly adds another layer of urgency to their mission, reminding Frodo that time runs short for more than just Middle-earth's freedom. The most disturbing image shows the eye of Sauron searching across vast distances, with intensity that suggests growing awareness of the ring's location. The Dark Lord's attention sweeps closer to their position with each passing moment, his perception growing stronger as the ring approaches its place of making. Galadriel's own revelation about the ring of power she bears adds complexity to Frodo's understanding of the forces arrayed in their conflict. Nenya's influence preserves the Golden Wood's timeless beauty, but its power comes with prices that few among the living can appreciate or understand. Her explanation of how the three rings depend upon the one for their continued function reveals the true scope of what destruction of the Master Ring would entail. Success in their mission would not only defeat Sauron, but would also bring an end to the elven realms that have preserved beauty and wisdom throughout the dark years. The lady's offer of sanctuary in Lothlorien presents Frodo with temptation that goes beyond simple self-preservation. She describes a life free from the ring's burden, spent in peace among those who understand the cost of bearing such responsibilities. The choice between safety and duty tears at his heart with almost physical pain. Her final test requires him to choose between personal salvation and the greater good that his mission serves. The mirror's waters grow still as starlight gathers around them, awaiting his decision about whether courage or wisdom should guide his path forward. The morning of departure arrives, with mist rising from the celebrant that transforms the river into a pathway of silver leading toward destinations that none can foresee. The Fellowship gathers at the harbour, where elven boats wait to carry them beyond the borders of Lothlorien and back into the world, where darkness gathers strength with each passing day. Celebdil stands ready with vessels crafted from materials that seem to capture and hold starlight within their pale hulls. These boats represent elven shipbuilding at its finest, designed to navigate waters both calm and treacherous with equal grace. Their construction speaks to understanding of river currents and hidden dangers that only centuries of experience can provide. Galadriel approaches each member of the Fellowship individually, her gifts chosen with insight that penetrates beyond surface appearances, to touch the deeper needs that will emerge during the trials ahead. Her selections reflect understanding of character that goes beyond casual observation to encompass knowledge gained through powers that few among the living possess. Aragorn receives a sheath wrought from the finest elven craft, its materials proof against weather and wear that would damage lesser work. The scabbard bears runes that speak to kingship and the burden of leading others through darkness, toward whatever light might await beyond the current age. Its touch seems to strengthen his resolve. Boromir accepts a golden belt that bears the tree of Gondor, worked in silver thread, a reminder of the kingdom he serves, and the people who depend upon his courage. The gift acknowledges his nobility while offering protection that may prove crucial when conventional armor fails against supernatural threats. Legolas receives a new bow strung with hair from Galadriel herself. It's wood grown in groves that have known no shadow since the Elder Days. The weapon's balance speaks to archery that transcends mere technical skill to become art that serves the cause of light against encroaching darkness. Gimli's request for a single strand of the lady's hair creates surprise that ripples through the assembled elves. His explanation of dwarven appreciation for beauty transforms what might have been presumption into homage that honors both giver and receiver. The 3 golden hairs he receives represent a treasure beyond price in dwarf reckoning. Sam's gift of Malarn seeds and earth from Galadriel's orchard speaks to his gardener's heart with promise of beauty that might survive even if their mission fails. The small box contains potential for renewal that could transform desolation into gardens worthy of the fairest realms. His tears speak to understanding that goes beyond words. Frodo receives a crystal phial containing light from Irindel's star, a gift that will illuminate darkness when all other lights fail. The vessel holds radiance that has shone since before the moon and sun began their courses, offering hope when despair threatens to overwhelm courage. Its weight seems negligible, yet its presence fills him with warmth. Merry and Pippin each receive silver belts that will protect them from harm, while serving as tokens of their inclusion among the heroes of the age. The young hobbits' gifts acknowledge their courage despite their inexperience, recognizing that valor comes in many forms and sizes. The loading of supplies proceeds with elven efficiency that leaves nothing to chance while avoiding any sense of urgency that might spoil their final hours in safety. Food that will not spoil, cloaks that shed rain while retaining warmth, rope that will not break under strain, designed to serve whatever needs might arise during their journey. Each boat receives provisions, calculated to sustain 3 travelers for the distances they must cover, before reaching the lands where Anduin splits into multiple channels. The elven bread alone could support them for weeks while taking up space that might otherwise hold far less useful cargo. Galadriel's final blessing encompasses the entire fellowship while addressing the specific challenges each member will face. Her words carry power that goes beyond simple good wishes to touch forces that govern fortune and fate. The elven lady's voice seems to linger in the air long after her lips cease moving. Her warning about the choices that await them downstream acknowledges dangers that go beyond physical threats to encompass spiritual trials that will test their unity more severely than any external enemy. The bonds that hold the fellowship together face stresses that may prove impossible to withstand. The boats slip from their moorings with barely a whisper of water against their hulls, the elven craft designed to move with stealth that renders them nearly invisible to watchers on either shore. Their passage disturbs neither fish nor fowl as they enter the current that will carry them toward whatever fate awaits. The Fellowship's last sight of Caris Galadon shows the city of trees, fading into morning mist like a vision from dreams too beautiful for waking memory to preserve intact. The golden leaves seem to wave farewell, while the songs of the Galadrim follow them downstream like blessings carried on the wind. Galadriel herself stands at the harbor's edge, until distance reduces her figure to a point of light that might be starshine reflecting on water. Her presence seems to linger even after sight fails, a reminder of wisdom and beauty that exists beyond the reach of shadow. The current takes them swiftly downstream toward rapids, where Whitewater speaks to challenges that will test both elven craft and fellowship courage. Behind them lies safety and counsel. Ahead waits the continuation of their quest through territories where friends become increasingly scarce and enemies multiply. The boats ride the swelling waters with grace that speaks to their makers' understanding of river lore accumulated across ages of experience. The Fellowship travels toward uncertainty with gifts that may prove their salvation when darkness closes around them once again. The days that follow their departure from Lothlorien unfold with deceptive tranquility as the Fellowship drifts southward on waters that seem determined to offer respite from the hardships they have endured. The Anduin carries them through landscapes that change gradually from the ethereal beauty of elven lands toward the wilder territories that mark the approach to Gondor's ancient borders. Their 3 boats maintain formation that allows conversation between crews, while preserving the flexibility to separate quickly should danger threaten from either shore. The elven craft respond to subtle shifts in current with grace that makes navigation feel effortless, their hulls designed to read water like experienced pilots interpret familiar roads. Aragorn shares the lead boat with Frodo and Sam, his ranger skills adapted to river travel, as he reads signs in the water's surface that speak to obstacles and opportunities ahead. His knowledge of Anduin's moods comes from previous journeys, when solitary travel required understanding every bend and rapid that might offer concealment or threaten destruction. The middle boat carries Boromir with Merry and Pippin, an arrangement that places the young hobbits under protection, while allowing the Gondorian to share stories of his homeland's geography as familiar landmarks begin appearing along the western shore. His tales paint pictures of a kingdom that once stretched far beyond its current diminished boundaries. Legolas guides the rear vessel with Gimli as his sole companion, their enforced proximity gradually wearing away the ancient antagonisms that have divided their peoples for generations. The elf's rivercraft combines with the dwarf's practical knowledge to create partnership that surprises both participants with its effectiveness. The changing scenery provides constant entertainment, as they pass from the last vestiges of Lothlorien's influence into territories where nature follows its own patterns without elven guidance. Hills rise higher along the eastern bank, while the western shore flattens into marshlands that extend toward horizons lost in morning mist. Wildlife returns in abundance as they leave behind the supernatural influences that make even animals cautious around elven realms. Herons fish in shallows, while hawks circle overhead, their presence speaking to ecological balance that has remained undisturbed by the conflicts raging in other parts of Middle-earth. The river's width increases steadily as tributaries add their waters to the main channel, transforming what began as a manageable waterway into something approaching the inland sea that Anduin becomes near its mouth. The current grows stronger while remaining steady, carrying them toward destinations that seem both inevitable and increasingly ominous. Evening camps on islands that dot the river's course provide opportunities for fellowship that their constant travel has made rare since leaving the last homely hassle. Shared meals around carefully concealed fires allow conversation that ranges from practical concerns about their route to deeper discussions about the choices that lie ahead. Gimli's growing respect for Legolas emerges through grudging admissions that elven craft has practical applications beyond mere decoration. The dwarf's praise comes sparingly but with sincerity that speaks to fundamental shifts in understanding between representatives of their ancient peoples. Boromir's contributions to these evening discussions reveal increasing preoccupation with strategies for using the ring against Sauron rather than destroying it. His arguments grow more sophisticated with each passing day, incorporating elements of military logic that make his positions difficult to dismiss entirely. The Gondorians' maps provide detailed knowledge of the territories they approach. His familiarity with every fortress and river crossing speaking to lifetime study of his kingdom's strategic situation. But his observations consistently return to themes of power and the opportunities that the ring might provide for turning the tide of war. Frodo's discomfort with these discussions becomes increasingly apparent as Boromir's attention focuses more intently on the ring-bearer himself. The hobbit's protective instincts respond to scrutiny that feels predatory despite its outward appearance of friendship and concern. Sam's loyalty manifests in subtle positioning that keeps him between Frodo and Boromir during conversations that stray too close to dangerous territory. The gardener's simple wisdom recognizes threats that more sophisticated minds might rationalize away. The river's current grows swifter as they approach the rapids that mark the beginning of Anduin's final descent toward the sea. The increased pace mirrors growing urgency that affects all members of the Fellowship, as their journey's end draws closer with each mile traveled. Aragorn's navigation becomes more challenging as the water's volume and speed require constant attention to avoid obstacles that could damage their boats or separate the Fellowship at the moment when unity becomes most crucial. His decisions balance speed against safety while maintaining their southward progress. The landscape along both shores grows increasingly desolate as they enter territories where Sauron's influence has begun affecting the very soil and water. Trees stand leafless despite the season, while streams run discolored from sources that speak to corruption spreading outward from Mordor's borders. Night watchers reveal growing signs of hostile observation from creatures that remain hidden during daylight hours. Red eyes gleam briefly in darkness along the shores, while splashes in the water suggest things moving beneath the surface that have no business in healthy rivers. The Fellowship's unity begins showing strain as the weight of their approaching decision presses against bonds that have already survived more testing than most friendships could endure. The peaceful days on the river start feeling like calm before storms that will either forge them into something stronger or scatter them beyond any hope of reunion. Boromir's voice carries new undertones when he speaks of the ring's power, his words revealing obsession that grows stronger with each league, that brings them closer to the moment when choice becomes unavoidable. The landing that Aragorn selects for their midday rest occupies a sheltered cove where ancient willows provide shade, while concealing their boats from observation by any watchers along the opposing shore. The respite offers welcome relief from hours of navigating increasingly treacherous currents, though the Fellowship's mood remains subdued despite the peaceful Boromir volunteers to gather firewood from the grove of trees that extends inland from their resting place. His offer accepted readily by companions, who welcomed the opportunity to stretch legs cramped from long hours in the narrow boats. The Gondorian's departure leaves the others free to attend to various tasks, without the tension his presence has begun creating. Frodo follows a path that leads away from the landing toward higher ground, where he might observe their route ahead while enjoying solitude that has become precious during their enforced proximity. The Hobbit's desire for quiet reflection speaks to burdens that grow heavier with each mile traveled toward their ultimate destination. The grove's peaceful atmosphere provides perfect contrast to the urgency that has driven their journey since leaving Lothlorien, the Golden Woods. Sunlight filters through leaves that have not yet felt the blight affecting vegetation closer to Mordor's borders. Birds sing in branches that remember seasons, when such music filled every woodland throughout Middle-earth. Boromir's approach through the trees comes silently, his ranger training allowing movement that disturbs neither twig nor leaf as he draws near the clearing where Frodo sits, contemplating the river's distant course. The man's face bears expressions that struggle between determination and doubt. His opening words carry forced casualness that fails to mask the intensity driving his thoughts toward topics that have consumed his attention for days. The Gondorian's questions about Frodo's resolve seem innocent enough, yet their direction becomes increasingly apparent as he probes the Hobbit's commitment to their stated mission. The conversation that develops reveals depths of desperation that Boromir has concealed beneath his warrior's facade. His description of Minas Tirith's desperate situation carries emotion that transforms military briefings into personal pleas for understanding. The White City's walls stand strong, but its defenders grow fewer with each assault. His people's suffering provides context for arguments that gain power through repetition and elaboration. Children go hungry while their fathers die defending positions that cannot be held indefinitely against odds that worsen with each passing season. The Gondorian's voice breaks as he describes losses that touch every family within his homeland's borders. The ring's power offers solutions that seem obvious to minds shaped by military necessity. Its influence could raise armies from the earth itself, while striking terror into hearts that currently know only confidence in their master's inevitable victory. Why destroy such a weapon when it might instead serve the cause of justice? Frodo's responses reveal understanding that goes beyond his years. Wisdom purchased through intimate experience with the ring's corrupting influence. The hobbit's gentle but firm refusal to consider alternatives to their stated mission springs from knowledge that cannot be shared through mere words. But Boromir's desperation overcomes the logic that would normally restrain his actions. His warrior's training focuses on seizing opportunities when they present themselves, rather than hoping for better chances that may never come. The sight of salvation, so close yet seemingly rejected, pushes him beyond the boundaries of reasonable behavior. The moment when words give way to action arrives without warning as Boromir's hand reaches for the ring, with movements too swift for Frodo to avoid. The Gondorian's face shows terrible conflict between noble intentions and methods that betray everything he has sworn to protect. Frodo's instinctive response brings the ring to his finger with speed born of practiced fear rather than conscious decision. The hobbit's disappearance occurs in the space between heartbeats, leaving Boromir grasping at empty air where his victim stood moments before. The silence that follows rings with implications that transform both participants in ways that cannot be undone. Boromir stands alone in the clearing with hands extended toward nothing, while his mind struggles to comprehend what his desperation has driven him to attempt. His voice calls out apologies and explanations to ears that may no longer be within hearing range. The words emerge, broken and scattered, as understanding of his actions penetrates through the madness that momentarily claimed his reason. Horror replaces determination as he recognizes the magnitude of his betrayal. The echo of his own voice speaking words of friendship and protection, while his hands reached for what they had sworn to defend, creates cognitive dissonance that threatens his sanity. The gap between intention and action yawns like a chasm that cannot be bridged through any amount of regret or self-recrimination. Frodo's flight through the grove proceeds with desperate urgency, as the ring's invisibility provides concealment, but not safety from pursuit that may involve more than simple physical tracking. The hobbit's understanding of what has just occurred includes recognition that Boromir's fall represents something beyond personal failure. The ring's influence has claimed another victim, despite every precaution and warning. The corruption operates through love rather than hate, transforming noble desire to protect into selfish grasping that destroys what it seeks to preserve. Boromir's fate demonstrates how the ring turns virtue itself into a weapon against its bearer's mission. The breaking point has arrived, not through external pressure, but through internal contradictions that no amount of courage or loyalty can resolve. The Fellowship's unity lies shattered by forces that were always present beneath the surface, waiting for the proper moment to tear apart bonds that seemed unbreakable. Boromir remains in the clearing with tears streaming down his face as he contemplates the ruin of everything he held sacred. His betrayal of trust stands complete, while the object of his desire vanishes beyond any hope of recovery. The sound of horns echoing across the water announces that their respite has ended in ways that none of them anticipated. Danger approaches from multiple directions, while the Fellowship faces its greatest crisis, divided and unprepared for the trials ahead. Frodo's flight through the ancient forest leads him up slopes that rise steadily toward the crown of Armon Hen, the hill of sight that has watched over this bend in Anduin since the Elder Days. The ring's weight seems to increase with each step, as invisible threads of malice stretch across vast distances to touch his hidden form with growing awareness. The stone seat that caps the hill stands empty beneath skies that have begun darkening despite the early hour. The seat of seeing awaits its next occupant with patience that speaks to purposes older than any kingdom that has risen and fallen within its view. Ancient runes carved into weathered stone hint at powers that few among the living remember how to invoke. The moment Frodo settles onto the carved throne, the ring's influence amplifies beyond anything he has previously experienced. The golden band burns against his finger, while his vision extends far beyond normal sight to encompass territories that stretch from the misty mountains to the borders of Mordor itself. Distance collapses as his enhanced perception reveals scenes unfolding simultaneously across hundreds of miles. The eye that regards him from the Dark Tower penetrates through concealment that should protect against any mortal gaze. Sauron's attention focuses with intensity that threatens to burn away every barrier between them. The Dark Lords will press us against Frodo's consciousness, with force that seeks to strip away not just physical concealment, but the very thoughts that drive his mission forward. The ring calls to its master with voice that grows stronger as the gap between them narrows toward nothing. Terror beyond anything Frodo has known paralyzes him, as understanding penetrates through layers of hope and determination to reveal the true magnitude of what opposes their quest. The power that built Barad-dûr and commands armies beyond counting focuses its complete attention on one small figure cowering beneath supernatural scrutiny. But another presence intercedes before Sauron's will can complete its work of domination. A voice that carries authority older than the current age speaks words that create barriers around Frodo's mind. Protection that holds against pressure that would shatter mountains. The battle that erupts between these competing powers uses Frodo's consciousness as their battlefield, while forces beyond his comprehension struggle for dominion over his fate. The ring becomes a conduit for energies that threaten to tear apart the fabric of reality itself. Commands echo in his mind as the voice that protects him issues instructions that penetrate through the chaos of supernatural conflict. The words carry familiar warmth despite their vast authority, speaking to recognition that defies explanation, while offering guidance that his desperate situation requires. Understanding arrives with sudden clarity that cuts through confusion to reveal choices that will determine not just his own fate, but the ultimate outcome of their entire quest. The Fellowship's continued existence serves Sauron's purposes by keeping the ring within reach of corruption that operates through love as well as fear. The realization that his companion's loyalty has become their greatest vulnerability strikes him with force that rivals any physical blow. Every bond of friendship provides another avenue for the ring's influence to spread outward from its bearer, toward those least equipped to resist its subtle corruption. Boromir's fall demonstrates how quickly noble intentions transform into selfish grasping when exposed to the ring's proximity for extended periods. The corruption operates so gradually that victims welcome each small compromise as reasonable adjustment rather than step toward ultimate betrayal. His choice crystallizes around understanding that protection requires separation rather than proximity. The ring must continue its journey toward destruction, but that path cannot include those whose courage makes them vulnerable to influences they cannot recognize or resist. The decision tears at his heart with pain that rivals any physical wound, yet its necessity becomes undeniable as he contemplates alternatives that lead inevitably toward the Fellowship's complete corruption. Love demands sacrifice that goes beyond personal preference to embrace what serves the greater good. The voice that protected him during the supernatural battle fades, as normal awareness returns to consciousness, no longer enhanced by the ring's terrible power. The stone seat releases him from visions that span continents, while his surroundings contract back to familiar scale. Frodo removes the ring with movements that feel like severing connections to parts of himself that he will never recover. The golden band's weight increases dramatically once it no longer rests against his skin, as if the brief separation has taught it new ways to burden its bearer. The forest around Armunhen erupts with sounds of battle, as the horns they heard earlier announce conflicts that have moved from distant threat to immediate danger. Voices carry through the trees, speaking in harsh languages that no civilized tongue should know, while the clash of weapons grows closer with each passing moment. His descent from the hill proceeds with desperate urgency, as understanding of what approaches drives him toward reunion with companions who may already be fighting for their lives. The path ahead leads through choices that will scatter them all to different fates, while serving purposes larger than individual survival. The weight of solitary responsibility settles on shoulders that seem too small to bear what the continuing quest will require. But necessity provides strength that comfort never could, while resolve hardens around decisions that brook no compromise. Frodo moves toward whatever battles await with determination that transcends fear of personal destruction. The ring's journey toward Mount Doom must continue, regardless of the cost to those who love him enough to share his burden. The sound of steel on steel grows louder as he approaches the Fellowship's camp, where other choices await resolution through blood and sacrifice that will determine who survives to continue their separate paths. The Uruk-hai emerge from the forest with coordinated precision that speaks to military training rather than the chaotic savagery typically associated with orc kind. Their black armor bears the white hand of Saruman, while their weapons gleam with the deadly efficiency of implements forged specifically for war against the free peoples of Middle-earth. The attack begins with volleys of arrows that force the remaining Fellowship members to seek whatever cover the riverside clearing can provide. Legolas responds immediately with shots that find their marks despite the confusion of sudden assault. But even elven archery cannot account for numbers that seem to multiply with each passing moment. Merry and Pippin find themselves cut off from their larger companions as the enemy's advance splits the Fellowship's defensive line. The young hobbits draw their swords with determination that transcends their obvious terror, but their small blades seem pitifully inadequate against foes whose reach and strength dwarf their own capabilities. Boromir's response to their danger transcends his earlier shame to become something approaching divine fury. The Gondorian warrior places himself between the hobbits and their attackers with movements that speak to training, refined through years of defending those who cannot defend themselves. His sword work achieves levels of excellence that transform combat into a deadly art form. Each stroke finds vital points in enemy armor, while his shield turns aside blows that would have ended the fight instantly. The white tree of Gondor on his surcoat seems to blaze with inner light, as he embodies everything noble about his ancient kingdom. The Uruk-hai press their attack with relentless determination that acknowledges no casualties as excessive if victory can be achieved. Their commander drives them forward with harsh orders delivered in the black speech, his voice promising rewards that motivate creatures whose loyalty stems from fear rather than honor. Aragorn and Legolas fight desperately to reach their surrounded companions, but the enemy's tactical deployment creates barriers that cannot be overcome quickly enough to prevent the isolation from becoming complete. Each step toward the hobbits requires cutting through opponents who seem willing to die if their sacrifice serves their mission's goals. Gimli's axe cleaves through Orc's shields with the methodical persistence that characterizes dwarf warfare at its finest. The son of Gloin creates his own path toward the embattled group, while his battle cry echoes off the surrounding trees with promises of vengeance for every blow struck against his companions. But the mathematics of their situation admit no solution that preserves all lives, while achieving victory over such overwhelming numbers. Boromir's tactical mind calculates odds that worsen with each enemy that falls, only to be replaced by two more emerging from the forest's depths. His decision to make his final stand around the hobbits, rather than attempting retreat, speaks to values that transcend personal survival. The warrior who might have claimed the ring for Gondor's salvation instead chooses to spend his life purchasing time for those whose courage exceeds their capacity to defend themselves. His decision to make his final stand around the hobbits, rather than attempting retreat, speaks to values that transcend personal survival. The warrior who might have claimed the ring for Gondor's salvation instead chooses to spend his life purchasing time for those whose courage exceeds their capacity to defend themselves. Boromir's shield arm fails first, as accumulated damage overwhelms even his considerable strength. The loss of defensive capability exposes him to attacks that his sword alone cannot turn aside. Yet he continues fighting with determination that refuses to acknowledge the inevitability of defeat. The arrows that finally bring him down strike from multiple directions simultaneously, their black shafts finding gaps in armor that has served him faithfully through countless battles. His fall comes not from any single devastating blow, but from the accumulated weight of wounds that would have stopped lesser men much earlier. Aragorn's arrival provides witness to heroism that demands recognition even as it proves too late for rescue. The ranger finds Boromir propped against a tree with Merry, and Pippin's safety purchased through sacrifice that honors everything noble about human nature. The dying warrior's words carry confession and plea for forgiveness that strips away pride to reveal the essential goodness that survived even his moment of weakness. His acknowledgement of failure combines with pride in his final action to create legacy that transcends the manner of his temporary fall from grace. Boromir's request for assurance that Minas Tirith will not fall speaks to love of homeland that motivated every choice throughout his life. His concern extends beyond personal redemption to encompass the people whose defense gave meaning to his existence. Aragorn's promise to honor the fallen warrior's sacrifice, while protecting his beloved city, provides comfort that eases the transition from life to whatever lies beyond. The ranger's words carry authority that will prove prophetic, as events unfold according to patterns that none present can foresee. The white tree of Gondor, worn over Boromir's heart, continues gleaming even as breath fails and eyes close for the final time. His death transforms shame into glory, while proving that redemption remains possible even for those who stumble in darkness. The silence that follows speaks to loss that diminishes all who survive to mourn his passing. The Fellowship's strength lies broken beyond any hope of repair. Yet Boromir's sacrifice ensures that some among them will live to continue the quest that claimed his life. The aftermath of battle leaves the surviving Fellowship members scattered among the dead, while smoke rises from fires that will burn until evening rain extinguishes what remains of the Uruk-hai assault. Aragorn kneels beside Boromir's body with hands that tremble, despite years of experience with violent death, the ranger's composure finally cracking under the weight of loss and responsibility. Legolas moves through the carnage with elven grace. That seems inappropriate for such devastation, his keen eyes reading signs that paint increasingly grim pictures of what has occurred during their separation. The elf's tracking skills reveal patterns in the disturbed earth that speak to purposes beyond simple raid or random violence. The evidence scattered across the battlefield tells stories that require no expertise to interpret with growing alarm. Merry and Pippin's tracks disappear among those of their captors, while the hobbits' swords lie abandoned where they fell during the final moments of resistance. Blood stains the grass, but not in quantities that suggest mortal wounds. Gimli's examination of enemy weapons provides additional intelligence about forces that created this disaster. The axework that cleaves through Uruk-hai armor reveals steel of quality that speaks to Saruman's growing industrial capacity. These creatures carried equipment that rivals anything forged in Gondor's armories. Aragorn's decision about their next course of action must balance competing obligations that admit no perfect solution. Frodo and Sam remain unaccounted for, while Merry and Pippin face captivity that may prove worse than death. The Fellowship's unity lies shattered beyond any hope of reconstruction. The discovery of Frodo's absence comes through Sam's frantic searching, rather than systematic investigation. The gardener's voice carries panic that transforms questions about his master's location into desperate pleas for assistance and finding someone who may already be beyond any help they might provide. Sam's investigation of the shoreline reveals evidence that speaks to deliberate departure rather than capture or accident. One boat missing from their small fleet suggests escape rather than tragedy, though the direction of that flight remains hidden from eyes that cannot read water as clearly as earth. The choice that crystallizes before the three remaining warriors requires abandoning either the captured hobbits or the ring-bearer whose mission represents their only hope for ultimate victory. Military logic demands pursuit of strategic objectives, while personal loyalty calls for immediate rescue of endangered companions. Aragorn's analysis of their situation reveals the cruel mathematics that govern their options. Frodo's departure with Sam suggests the ring continues its journey toward destruction, making pursuit of the hobbits a choice between certain knowledge and probable success rather than competing strategic necessities. Legolas supports the decision to follow Merry and Pippin, with arguments that acknowledge the difficulty while emphasizing their obligation to those who cannot escape through their own efforts. The young hobbits face dangers that transcend physical threat, to encompass corruption that could transform them into weapons against their former friends. Gimli's agreement completes their unanimous choice to become the three hunters whose pursuit will carry them across territories where speed matters more than stealth. The dwarf's mountain-bred endurance may prove crucial during a chase that will test limits of mortal stamina against enemies whose supernatural nature grants advantages that conventional pursuit cannot overcome. The funeral honors they arrange for Boromir reflect both urgency and respect as they prepare their fallen companion for his final journey. The boat that will carry him over Roro's Falls becomes a tomb worthy of Gondor's greatest heroes, while serving practical necessity that prevents proper burial. Boromir's placement in the vessel speaks to dignity that transcends the haste required by their desperate circumstances. His sword lies upon his breast, while his cloven shield rests at his feet, the arrangement creating imagery that bards will celebrate when songs commemorate his sacrifice for generations to come. The belt of gold and the silver-hafted knife complete his funeral regalia, while flowers gathered from the riverside provide beauty that softens the harshness of death in battle. Their efforts transform necessity into ceremony that honors both the dead and the living who must continue without his protection. The boat's launch marks the end of the Fellowship as originally conceived, while beginning new chapters that will separate former companions across vast distances. The vessel disappears over the falls with cargo that represents everything noble about the age that draws toward its close. Aragorn's tracking skills immediately engage, with Sin reading that reveals the Uruk-hai's direction and probable destination. The enemy's path leads toward Isengard rather than Mordor, suggesting objectives that serve Saruman's purposes rather than those of the Greater Darkness. The pace required to maintain contact with their quarry pushes the three hunters beyond normal limits of endurance, while the trail grows fresher with each mile gained through determination that refuses to acknowledge fatigue. Their pursuit becomes a race where hours gained or lost may determine whether rescue remains possible. Legolas demonstrates elven stamina that surpasses mortal capability, while his enhanced senses provide intelligence about their enemy's condition and intentions. The elf's observations suggest the Uruk-hai carry burdens that slow their advance while maintaining formation that speaks to discipline rarely seen among orc kind. Gimli's shorter legs require compensation through pure determination, as the dwarf matches his companion's pace through sheer refusal to become the factor that limits their speed. His breathing grows labored, but his stride remains steady, as mountain-bred constitution proves its worth. The first day's pursuit establishes patterns that will govern their chase across Rohan's plains. They move faster than their enemies, but not quickly enough to close the gap, before darkness forces halt to efforts that cannot continue safely without light to read the signs that guide their direction. The night that follows brings little rest, as each hunter contemplates the magnitude of their undertaking, the distances involved, and the time constraints create challenges that may prove beyond mortal capacity to overcome, despite the righteousness of their cause. Their former fellowship dissolved into separate quests that may never converge again. The three hunters begin their desperate race against time and distance, while hoping that elsewhere, two other hobbits continue their own journey toward whatever destiny awaits in the fires of Mount Doom. The path down from Armen Hen leads through undergrowth that seems to clutch at Frodo's clothes with desperate fingers, as if the very forest understands that momentous decisions have been reached in the heights above. Each step carries him further from the supernatural clarity he experienced on the seat of seeing, while bringing him closer to actions that will transform understanding into irreversible reality. The sounds of battle fade behind him, as distance muffles the clash of weapons that speaks to conflicts he can no longer afford to join. His companions fight bravely against odds that worsen with each passing moment. Yet his presence among them would serve the enemy's purposes more effectively than any weapon Saruman might deploy. The ring's weight increases with each yard traveled, its golden surface growing warm against his palm, as if responding to proximity to decisions that will determine its ultimate fate. The burden that seemed manageable during their river journey now threatens to overwhelm strength that must somehow endure trials that lie ahead. Frodo's understanding of what separation will cost penetrates beyond strategic necessity to encompass personal loss that tears at his heart with physical pain. The bonds forged through shared danger and mutual dependence cannot be severed, without leaving wounds that may never properly heal. Sam's loyalty represents the cruelest aspect of choices that admit no perfect solutions. The gardener's devotion creates vulnerability that the ring will eventually exploit, transforming love into another weapon directed against their mission's success. Yet, abandoning Sam feels like betraying everything that makes their friendship worth preserving. The Fellowship's dissolution serves purposes larger than individual comfort, while protecting those who lack experience with the ring's subtle corruption. Boromir's fall demonstrates how quickly noble intentions transform into selfish grasping when exposed to influences that operate below the threshold of conscious recognition. Memory of Galadriel's mirror provides additional motivation, as visions of the Shire's destruction remind him that delay serves only the enemy's interests. Time works against them with each day that allows Sauron's influence to spread further across territories that still maintain some vestige of freedom and beauty. The clearing where their boats wait appears exactly as they left it hours earlier. Yet everything has changed in ways that render familiar objects strange and threatening. The elven craft that carried them safely from Lothlorien now represent choices between competing loyalties that cannot be reconciled through compromise. Frodo's hands shake as he drags one vessel toward water that reflects afternoon sunlight with brightness that seems to mock the darkness gathering round his heart. The boat responds to his efforts with grace that speaks to craftsmanship, designed to serve purposes of beauty as well as utility. The supplies he transfers from their common stock include only necessities that two travelers might require for a journey, whose duration cannot be calculated with any precision. Each item selected represents careful balance between weight and utility, while acknowledging that luxuries have no place in what lies ahead. The Lember's bread alone could sustain them for weeks, while taking up space that larger provisions would require in bulk, that their small craft cannot accommodate. The elven cloaks provide concealment that may prove more valuable than armor, when stealth becomes their only defense against enemies too numerous for direct confrontation. His note for those who remain behind struggles to explain decisions that resist easy articulation, choices that spring from necessity rather than preference, while serving purposes that transcend individual survival. The words seem inadequate for conveying emotions that language cannot properly contain. The explanation he attempts acknowledges debts that can never be repaid, while expressing gratitude that inadequate vocabulary makes impossible to convey properly. Their friendship has provided strength that enables choices requiring courage beyond his natural capacity. Yet that same friendship now becomes liability that threatens everything they have sought to accomplish. The boat slides into current with barely a whisper of water against its hull, the elven craft designed to move with stealth that renders detection unlikely by any watchers who might observe from concealed positions along either shore. The Anduin accepts its new burden while maintaining the steady flow that will carry them toward territories where different laws govern survival. Frodo settles into the stern with paddle in hand and determination in his heart, though both feel inadequate for challenges that await beyond the next bend in the river. The familiar weight of Sting at his side provides small comfort, while the ring's presence creates constant reminder of what he carries toward whatever fate awaits in Mordor's fires. The current takes them away from the Fellowship's landing with speed that transforms familiar landmarks into memories almost before they pass from sight. Each stroke of his paddle increases distance that may never be bridged again, while carrying them toward destinations that exist more in hope than geographical certainty. The loneliness begins immediately, as silence replaces the constant conversation that had marked their river journey from Lorien. The absence of voices discussing route and weather creates emptiness that the boat seems too small to contain, while highlighting the magnitude of responsibility that now rests solely on his shoulders. Sam's discovery of his departure will bring pain that Frodo regrets even as he acknowledges its necessity. The gardener's loyalty deserves better reward than abandonment, yet staying together would guarantee failure for mission. That represents Middle-earth's only hope for avoiding eternal darkness. The eastern shore draws closer, as he angles their craft toward landing places that promise concealment, while offering access to whatever paths lead toward the Emyn Muil and the territories beyond. The boat responds to his guidance with sensitivity that makes steering feel effortless despite his limited experience with watercraft. Behind him, the Fellowship faces trials that will test bonds of friendship and courage in ways that his presence would only complicate. Ahead lies journey that must be completed regardless of personal cost. Path that leads through territory where every step brings them closer to destruction or salvation. The ring pulses against his palm with rhythm that matches his heartbeat, while promising power that could resolve all difficulties through methods that would destroy everything worth preserving. The temptation whispers constantly now, voice that grows stronger with each mile traveled toward its place of making. Frodo guides their boat toward shore with movements that commit them irrevocably to choices that allow no retreat. The quest continues with 2 instead of 9, bearing hope that may prove insufficient, but remains their only weapon against despair that would serve the enemy's purposes more effectively than any army. Sam's return from gathering kindling reveals the devastating truth with brutal clarity as his eyes fall upon the space where one of their boats should rest against the muddy shore. The carefully arranged pile of firewood tumbles from nerveless fingers, while his mind struggles to accept evidence that speaks to abandonment beyond his worst fears. The note bearing his name in Frodo's careful script provides confirmation that transforms suspicion into heartbreaking certainty. Each word cuts deeper than any blade, as understanding penetrates through layers of hope to reach the core of despair that threatens to overwhelm his simple gardener's heart. Frodo's explanation of why solitary travel serves their mission's needs makes perfect sense to Sam's logical mind, while simultaneously destroying everything that has given meaning to his existence since leaving the Shire. The reasoning behind his master's decision carries weight that cannot be disputed yet, feels like betrayal nonetheless. The gardener's anguished cry echoes across water that reflects afternoon sunlight with indifference to mortal suffering. His voice carries pain that goes beyond personal loss, to encompass the shattering of loyalty that had seemed as permanent as the turning of seasons or the rising of dawn. But Sam's grief transforms quickly into determination that acknowledges no obstacle as insurmountable when love provides motivation stronger than fear of death or failure. The sight of Frodo's small figure growing distant across the Anduin's broad waters galvanizes him into action that transcends rational consideration of odds or consequences. His boots come off first as practical necessity overrides modesty, followed by the mail shirt that would drag him to the bottom within moments of entering current, that shows no mercy to those who misjudge its power. Each garment removed brings him closer to a decision that terrifies him even as its inevitability becomes undeniable. The water strikes him like physical blow as he plunges into Corinth that immediately demonstrates the folly of his desperate gambit. Sam's swimming skills extend no further than dog paddling across the Bywater pool during childhood summers, when such activities seemed like play rather than matters of life and death. The Anduin's flow carries him downstream, faster than his flailing arms can propel him toward the opposite shore. Each stroke a battle against forces that seem determined to separate him from his beloved master permanently. The current's strength exceeds anything he experienced during their peaceful river journey, when elven boats provided protection against such dangers. Water fills his mouth and nose, as waves generated by his own thrashing threaten to overwhelm efforts that grow more desperate with each passing moment. The eastern shore seems to recede rather than approach, while his strength ebbs at alarming rate that speaks to limits rapidly being reached. Terror of drowning wars, with terror of abandoning Frodo, to face alone whatever horrors await in territories where no friendship can provide comfort against supernatural forces that seek the ring's recovery. The choice between dying in the river or living with knowledge of his failure creates motivation that sustains effort beyond normal endurance. Frodo's voice calling his name across the water provides encouragement that transforms despair into renewed determination. The sound of his master's concern penetrates through physical exhaustion, to touch reserves of strength that love makes available when duty demands sacrifice. The boat's approach brings salvation, in the form of elven craft that responds to Frodo's paddle with grace, that closes distance between them faster than Sam's failing swimming could ever achieve. Strong hands reach over the gunwale to grasp his wrists with grip that speaks to relief matching his own desperate gratitude. The moment when Sam collapses into the boat's bottom brings reunion that transcends mere physical rescue, to encompass restoration of bonds that seem severed beyond repair. Water streams from his clothes, while tears of joy mix with river water on cheeks. that bear evidence of fear overcome through love. Frodo's explanation of his attempted abandonment carries shame that speaks to understanding of how much pain his decision caused the one person whose loyalty had never wavered throughout their journey from innocence toward whatever fate awaits. His apology acknowledges wounds that good intentions cannot excuse. Sam's response reveals depths of devotion that go beyond duty or habit to touch something fundamental about the nature of friendship itself. His promise to share whatever dangers lie ahead comes not from obligation but from recognition that separation would destroy both of them regardless of strategic advantages it might provide. The gardener's simple wisdom cuts through complex reasoning to identify truths that sophisticated minds might miss entirely. His observation that they belong together carries authority that springs from understanding deeper than tactical considerations or military necessity. Their mutual decision to continue as partners restores purpose that solitary travel had begun to erode through isolation, to complete for mortal hearts, to sustain indefinitely. The boat carries them both toward whatever challenges await, while renewed bonds provide strength that neither could achieve alone. The eastern shore accepts their landing with indifference that speaks to geography unconcerned with human drama. Yet the solid ground beneath their feet represents foundation for partnership that will endure whatever trials the road ahead might bring. Sam's loyal heart has triumphed over logic that would have separated them permanently, while Frodo's acceptance of that loyalty acknowledges truths about friendship that no amount of strategic thinking could replace. Their unity restored, they face the darkness together. The path that leads away from Anduin's banks stretches toward territories where maps provide little guidance, and every step carries them deeper into lands where Sauron's influence grows stronger with each mile traveled. But they walk that path as friends, whose bond has been tested and proven stronger than fear. The ring's burden remains unchanged, yet the strength required to bear it forward has been doubled through reunion. That transforms solitary despair into shared determination. Two hobbits begin their final approach toward whatever destiny awaits in the fires of Mount Doom. Behind them, the river continues its ancient course toward the sea, while carrying no memory of the choice that restored hope to hearts that had nearly surrendered to the weight of responsibility too great for any single person to bear alone. The afternoon sun that witnesses the Fellowship's final dissolution casts long shadows across landscapes that will never again see the nine walkers traveling together toward a common destination. The bonds forged in Rivendell's council chamber and strengthened through trials that tested every aspect of their unity now stretch across distances that may prove impossible to bridge again. Aragorn leads Legolas and Gimli across terrain that bears the clear marks of Uruk High Passage, their pursuit carrying them toward territories where speed matters more than stealth. The three hunters move with determination that transforms grief into purpose, while their quarry maintains lead that translates each lost hour into reduced chances for successful rescue. The ranger's transformation from reluctant guide to acknowledged leader occurs without ceremony or formal recognition, necessity creating authority that bloodline alone could never establish. His decisions balance urgency against endurance, while calculating odds that worsen with each mile the enemy gains. through advantages that organized malice provides over desperate pursuit. Legolas adapts elven grace to the demands of sustained overland travel that will test even his supernatural constitution. The elf's tracking skills supplement Aragorn's woodcraft, while his enhanced senses provide intelligence about their enemy's condition and probable destination that hope alone could never supply. Gimli's determination transcends physical limitations through sheer refusal to become the factor that limits their pursuit's effectiveness. The dwarf's mountain-bred endurance proves itself against challenges that would stop lesser beings, while his loyalty to the captured hobbits burns with intensity that age will never diminish. Miles away across the Anduin's waters, Frodo and Sam begin their own journey through territories where every landmark speaks to approaching proximity to powers that have waited centuries for the ring's return. Their small figures move through landscapes increasingly marked by corruption that spreads outward from Mordor like poison seeping through formerly healthy soil. The ring's weight grows more oppressive with each step toward its place of making, as if the golden band recognizes familiar territory and responds with eagerness that its bearer finds deeply disturbing. The burden that seemed manageable during their river journey now threatens to overwhelm strength that must somehow endure trials far greater than anything they have yet experienced. Sam's presence provides comfort that goes beyond simple companionship to encompass the kind of loyalty that enables heroes to accomplish tasks that would crush solitary efforts. The gardener's simple wisdom and unwavering devotion create foundation upon which hope can build despite odds that rational calculation would find impossible to overcome. Their path leads through the Emyn Muil toward territories where ancient watchers still maintain their vigil over approaches to the Black Land. The stone sentinels that guard these passages have witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, while remaining constant in their opposition to forces that would corrupt the very foundations of creation. The boats that carried the Fellowship safely from Lothlorien now serve different purposes, as one bears the three hunters' supplies, while another provides transport for two hobbits, whose mission represents Middle-earth's final hope for avoiding eternal darkness. The elven craft adapts to new circumstances, with grace that speaks to workmanship designed to serve whatever purposes their users require. Boromir's funeral boat disappears over Rhoros Falls, carrying cargo that represents everything noble about the age, drawing toward its close. His sacrifice demonstrates how redemption remains possible even for those who stumble in darkness, while his death marks the end of innocence that had somehow survived, despite overwhelming evidence of evil's growing power. The currents that separate former companions carry more than water and would toward different destinations. Hope and despair flow in equal measure through channels that will never converge again, each stream bearing burdens that may prove too heavy for those who must navigate waters that grow more treacherous with each mile traveled. In Lothlorien, Galadriel watches events unfold with perception that transcends normal sight to encompass possibilities that remain hidden from lesser awareness. The Lady of the Golden Wood understands how choices made in desperate moments create consequences that ripple outward through time like stones dropped in still water. Her mirror reflects images of scattered companions pursuing different aspects of the same ultimate goal, while dangers multiply around each separate path. The vision shows courage and cowardice, wisdom and folly, all mixed together in proportions that defy easy prediction about which qualities will prove decisive when final tests arrive. The Fellowship's division serves purposes that go beyond strategic necessity to encompass spiritual requirements that unity could never fulfill. Some burdens must be borne alone, while others require the kind of support that only true friendship can provide. The separation ensures that both conditions can be met simultaneously. Merry and Pippin face captivity that may transform them from protected innocence into active participants in conflicts that will test courage they never knew they possessed. Their youth provides advantages that experience cannot match, while creating vulnerabilities that wisdom might have avoided. The Uruk-hai who carry them toward Isengard serve purposes that extend beyond simple prisoner-taking, to encompass Saruman's broader strategies for victory over forces that still resist his master's will. The young hobbit's capture represents opportunity for intelligence gathering that could prove decisive in battles yet to come. Night falls across Middle-earth, with darkness that seems deeper than normal shadow, as if supernatural forces have begun affecting even natural phenomena. Stars that once provided reliable guidance now flicker uncertainly while the moon's phases follow patterns that confuse those who depend upon celestial navigation. The wind carries scents and sounds that speak to changes occurring far beyond the reach of normal senses. Transformations that touch every corner of creation as the final conflict approaches its climax. The very air seems charged with possibilities that could reshape reality according to principles that few among the living understand. The sundering of the Fellowship marks the end of one chapter, while beginning others that will test every bond of friendship and loyalty in ways that shared danger never could. Each member embarks upon individual trials that will either forge them into something greater than they were, or destroy them completely. The wheel of fate turns according to patterns established before the world's making, carrying all participants toward destinations that remain hidden behind veils of uncertainty. Hope and despair balance on edges sharper than any blade, while the future waits to be determined by choices not yet made. The first volume of their tale draws toward its close with questions unanswered and fates undetermined, yet the foundation has been laid for whatever follows. The seeds of heroism have been planted in soil watered by sacrifice, ready to bloom when darkness seems complete and all hope appears lost. The transformation that has overtaken for simple hobbits since first stepping beyond the Shire's borders encompasses changes that go far deeper than the miles beneath their feet or the trials written across their faces. The innocent creatures who once measured adventure by the distance to the next village now understand how easily comfortable assumptions crumble when confronted with realities too vast for sheltered minds to have imagined. Wisdom has come to them not through books or gentle instruction, but through experiences that strip away illusions with the merciless efficiency of winter wind removing autumn's last leaves. Each lesson learned demands payment in portions of innocence that can never be recovered, transforming understanding into something far more precious and infinitely more costly than knowledge gained through safer means. The bonds that connect them transcend physical distance in ways that proximity alone could never achieve. Brotherhood forged in the crucible of shared peril creates connections that span continents without weakening. links that grow stronger rather than more fragile. When tested by separation and uncertainty about reunion, courage has revealed itself to be not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite terror that would paralyze lesser spirits. The hobbits who once worried about missing second breakfast now face choices where wrong decisions could doom entire peoples. Yet they continue forward because someone must and no one else can. The concept of home has expanded beyond the Shire's green boundaries to encompass all lands, where freedom allows simple pleasures to flourish without the shadow of tyranny. Their fight preserves not just familiar places, but the very possibility that somewhere children might play without fear, and gardens might grow without the corruption that spreads from centers of concentrated evil. The weight of responsibility has taught them that true heroism rarely announces itself with trumpets and banners, but more often walks quietly through darkness, carrying burdens that others cannot even see. Glory belongs to minstrels' tales, while actual heroes concern themselves with completing tasks that may never be celebrated or even remembered. The nature of sacrifice has been revealed through examples, both inspiring and heartbreaking, showing how love sometimes demands choices that tear the heart while serving purposes larger than personal happiness. Those who give their lives for others achieve immortality, not through monuments, but through the continuing existence of what they died to preserve. Hope endures not because victory seems certain, but because the alternative to hoping is surrender to despair that serves only the enemy's purposes. Even when darkness appears complete and defeat seems inevitable, the mere act of continuing forward creates possibilities that resignation would destroy before they could take root. The value of friendship has been proven through trials that reveal its strength while testing its limits. True companions share burdens that would crush individuals, while finding strength in unity that multiplication alone cannot explain. The mathematics of loyalty operate according to principles that transcend simple addition. The corruption of power has shown its subtle face through examples that demonstrate how noble intentions provide no protection against influences that work below the threshold of conscious recognition. The ring's evil lies not in making good people do obviously wrong things, but in convincing them that wrong choices serve right purposes. The persistence of beauty has emerged as both weapon and reward in struggles against forces that would reduce all creation to uniform grayness, serving their master's will. Music and laughter, and the memory of spring mornings provide strength that armies cannot match, while offering glimpses of what victory would actually mean. The interconnectedness of all living things has become apparent through understanding how individual choices ripple outward to affect destinies that seem completely unrelated. The gardener's loyalty and the king's courage and the wizard's sacrifice all contribute to outcomes that depend upon their combined effect rather than any single heroic act. The cyclical nature of history has shown how each age faces its own version of eternal conflicts between creation and destruction, love and hatred, hope and despair. The particular forms may change, but the essential choice remains constant across time, requiring each generation to decide anew which principles will guide their actions. The mystery of providence has revealed itself through coincidences too meaningful to be accidental, yet too subtle to be called direct intervention. Help arrives when most needed, while guidance appears in forms that require wisdom to recognize and courage to follow despite incomplete understanding. The education they have received in the wider world has prepared them for roles they never sought, while revealing capabilities they never suspected they possessed. The Shire's peaceful teachings provided foundation, but the application of those lessons required experiences that comfort could never supply. The price of knowledge has been paid in full through losses that will cast shadows over whatever joy their success might eventually bring. Understanding the true nature of evil and the cost of opposing it leaves scars that victory cannot heal, wounds that serve as permanent reminders of what preservation of innocence actually requires. The meaning of their quest extends beyond the destruction of a single object, to encompass the preservation of possibilities that future generations will inherit. Their success or failure will determine not just the political arrangement of Middle-earth, but the very nature of what it means to live free from fear. The continuation of their journey occurs now in forms that maps cannot chart and distance cannot measure. Though scattered across vast territories, they remain united in purpose, while their individual paths serve the same ultimate goal through means that separation makes possible. The Third Age draws toward its climax with outcomes that will echo through all subsequent history. Yet the final chapters remain unwritten by hands that still tremble with the weight of such responsibility. The road goes ever on, leading toward destinations that courage must discover and love must illuminate when all other guides fail. In darkness and in light, in hope and in despair, the road continues forward because someone must walk it, and no one else can. The journey that began with a birthday party in the Shire now carries implications that span ages. Yet the feet that walk it remain those of simple folk who understand that extraordinary times require ordinary people to become more than they ever imagined possible. Thank you for walking this part of the road with me, dear listeners. May your own paths lead toward whatever light awaits beyond the shadows that sometimes surround us all. Sweet dreams, and remember that even the smallest person can change the course of the future when they refuse to surrender to the darkness.